Hey everybody, welcome back to the next part of my Dialing In series. Today I'm looking at the 145 Rotary model that we have in our Line 6 Helix. This is a model of an old Leslie speaker, a rotating speaker with a horn and a woofer that are basically rotating and giving a very cool modulation effect. This has been used in countless songs, originally made obviously for organ, but guitar players have really enjoyed using this effect. A couple I can think of off the top of my head: Cold Shop by Stevie Ray Vaughan, some of the parts in Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden, to name just a couple. Now, I've heard a lot of folks complain, and I've had a lot of complaints sent my way, with people saying that they just don't like the rotary effects that we have in the Helix. And I think I've come up with, I hope, is a solution. I had a little idea when messing around with this, and I hope you guys find this interesting. So anyways, without further ado, let's go over to HX Edit. All right, so here we are over in HX Edit, and you'll notice I have a little preset going here. I have my little LA Studio Comp at the end, a dab of room reverb just to give it a little bit of ambience. I have my 145 Rotary. I have the Matchstick Channel 1 amp with the stock settings as I pull it up when it just comes up from the factory. And I have an IR this time, something a little different, but I'm trying out my latest release on the Line 6 Marketplace, which is the Ravv 212 Impulse Response Bundle, which is a set of impulse responses I shot using some really nice gear and nice microphones of my Ravv 212 speaker cabinet with Vintage 30. So if I turn the 145 Rotary off, this is our sort of bass sound. All right, so sounds good. Now, if I turn on the Rotary, we get this effect. Now let's see what the settings do. So on these old Leslie speakers, we had two speed settings. We had a choral setting and we had a tremolo setting, the choral setting being the slower of the two. So the folks at Line 6 have modeled this, and I think they've done it quite well. They have the slow setting, which would be the choral, and the fast would be the tremolo setting. And you'll notice I've assigned that to foot switch 1. So when I go to my HX Stomp here up on the tabletop, I can switch between those. Here's the slow setting. Now, one thing I am going to do is I'm just going to come to the drive control and bring it down. Now we can control the speed of the slow speed and the fast speed, and we can set that wherever we want. We can have that as note sync, so it's tied to the tempo, which is fine. I'm not going to be doing that for this particular video. Now you might ask how I ended up at the 0.8 hertz and 6.6 hertz settings. I'll talk about that in a moment. But now, when it transitions from the slow speed to the fast speed, which is a real sort of signature part of the sound of a Leslie speaker, they've included the ramp time. And what the ramp time is how long it's going to take to get from the slow speed to the fast speed. So we have a slow setting. You'll notice if I hit a chord, you'll hear it ramp up to that faster speed and back down. Back down to the slower speed fairly slowly. If we set it to medium, you'll hear it ramp up a little bit faster, and if I set it to fast, it's going to get there a lot quicker. So by setting that to a foot switch, I think that's one of the most important things to allow us to have the control over using this as a real Leslie speaker would have been used, with the ability to be able to switch between these speeds, right? So if I was playing... Now, it'd be a lot easier if I had it at my feet. I couldn't get it set up there with the setup I have here. I didn't have cables set up in a way that I could. So that's great. So we'll leave that at medium for now. Now, what about the drive control? by pushing that drive up, we get a lot more distortion. Kind of gives us that John Lord organ sound. Now, one question is where we should place this. If I take that and place it before the amp, that distortion is going to be smoothed out somewhat by the fact it's going into a speaker cab or an IR or a stock cab. So it can be used really interesting ways, almost an overdrive pedal. But if I set this over to fast, it's really going to be up to us where we want to place it as far as the actual rotary effect. I'm keeping it after the amp for now, but it could easily be put in front as well. Now, one really interesting thing we have is the speaker blend. Okay, so if I go all the way to the woofer versus all the way to the horn, versus balanced equally, gives us the ability to darken our tone up. Maybe we want to go a little bit towards the woofer. Or we could thin it out by going the other way. Okay, we'll leave that in the center for now. Now the mix is just so we can blend in some of the unaffected dry signal. We could also use that with an expression pedal, assign that so that we could like maybe blend it out or blend it back in. Really cool. Level is just our final output level, and headroom is going to allow us, like any other model in the Helix with a headroom control, to be able to just kind of give ourselves some more headroom before we get into any clipping or anything. So we're not really talking about those things. One complaint I hear a lot is that this effect isn't overly realistic. Well, one reason could be that maybe people aren't accessing the function where they switch by foot between slow and fast, which allows them to get a more realistic simulation. But there is another problem here. In my research, I came across this, and I thought this might possibly be one of the reasons why, and I think I found a solution for it. If you look over when reading about the Leslie speaker, it says, control of a Leslie speaker is normally catered for by an external two-way switch between two settings marked choral and tremolo, as I mentioned already. The switch is mounted on the controlling instrument so the player can easily switch settings. Some earlier models were limited to off and tremolo, and some later models had all three settings. On both settings, the treble horn rotates slightly faster than the bass woofer, about 50 revolutions per minute for choral and 400 RPM for tremolo, compared to the woofer's 40 RPM and 340 RPM respectively. Now you might wonder why I would look into that. Well, in my calculations, and if my understanding is correct, the 50 RPMs that would be the choral setting when set to the horn would actually equate to about 0.8 hertz. I believe it's about 0.83 hertz, actually. The fast speed of 400 RPM, which would be the tremolo setting for when we're talking about the horn, would equate to somewhere in and around 6.6 hertz. Now, when talking about the woofer, we read that those two speeds would be 40 RPM and 340 RPM. Well, those equated to different settings in hertz. The 40 setting would be in and around the 0.66, and the 340 RPM setting would be more around the 5.6 hertz. So what I did over here is I set up the same preset we were just listening to, but I put two instances of 145 rotary. I got thinking that we have this speaker blend control. What if we set up one so that I have a split path where I'm routing an even split to both, and what you'll notice here is on the dual path, and this is so we can compare them, I have both of these engaged, but when I go down to the single path, I disengage this, I bring the B level right out so we're not blending a dry signal in with it. And then I also go up here, and when we go to the single, I put this back so it's equal horn and woofer at just one setting. So I thought, is it possible for us to mimic the two different speakers, the horn and the woofer, traveling at slightly different RPMs? And I think we did it here. So if we go and look at the settings, I have the drive at 0, ramp time on both is at medium. This B path is set 100% to woofer. The top path is set 100% to horn. And I have the settings at 0.8 hertz and 6.6 hertz on the horn, as I talked about. And I have 0.6 and 5.6 on the woofer. And I am controlling both of these with the single foot switch for slow and fast. So here's the sound of the single rotary. Now to dual. Do you hear on the tails, we hear kind of how the two speakers are working at different speeds, and I think that that may be lending a little more realism to the sound. So I think that little discrepancy between the woofer and the treble or horn setting is actually something that can add a little more realism. And maybe that's the reason why some folks find that this doesn't sound truly authentic with just one instance. But I think the folks at Line 6 had a real stroke of genius in allowing us to blend the speakers, so it allows us to do this kind of split path thing and have it work this way. So pretty cool stuff. So what do you guys think? Did you enjoy that? I hope that that actually helps some folks to be able to dial in their rotary sound in a little more realistic fashion and get something that is more kind of like what you would hear in the real world. It was really interesting when I started researching the speakers. I had those ideas that, man, if we just use two of them, use the foot switch to be able to switch between the speeds, use the original settings or as close as we can get them on the Helix, and then have the woofer and the horn at different speed settings. I thought that might be something really cool, and I really hope it does help some folks. So anyways, anybody who you know who is struggling with that, please share this video with them. Please like the video, help the algorithm pick it up, and more people can see this, and hopefully it can help a few folks out. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I'll be back really soon with some more. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and sharing your time with me. Ciao for now.